Now, the reprioritization of funds and the possibility of a load-shedding relief grant being discussed at this week's Cabinet Lekgotla. It's hoped that the proposed move will help bypass processes that government says prevented from urgently intervening to buy emergency power. But concerns have been raised about the possibility of funds being looted, with calls by some for Parliament to intervene. Govan Whittles takes a look.
This Cabinet Lekgotla will receive legal advice on the scope and scale of a proposed state of disaster aimed at addressing the energy crisis, and it will include reports on how much money should be reprioritized.
It's difficult now to say, once there's a legal basis to declare a state of disaster, what will be the implications? Remember the COVID, when we declared a disaster, it dictated that money is be released for particular stressed situations. So to actually know what are you going to do, but let me say this, we are worried, and I've asked my team in the monitoring and evaluation to keep on analyzing the impact of this crisis in the broader societal situation. What that outcome will be and what it will mean to government is another issue.
The leader of government business, Deputy President David Mabuza, was curiously absent, and while his apology was accepted, it's not clear why he couldn't be at the meeting. Cabinet says it hopes to use the state of disaster to bypass certain processes.
Of course, there's a call that wouldn't a disaster declaration help us jump other processes which sometimes do not respond to the situation. We don't have a response yet with regard to whether there's a legal base for us to declare disaster. Investigations are being done. I hope we'll be advised as quick as possible in a manner consistent with the crisis that we're confronted.
The Democratic Alliance, which called for a state of disaster last year, says government should use it to buy diesel.
The disaster management funding should be utilized for the procurement of diesel to cover the short-term gap that Eskom has in purchasing diesel between now and the start of its new financial year in April. So basically for 2 months we should be buying diesel with disaster management funding.
The party also wants Parliament to keep a close eye on spending.
There needs to be parliamentary oversight. We're calling on Parliament to establish an ad hoc committee to oversee the state of disaster in Eskom and the electricity sector, and to make sure that the regulations aren't misused or that there isn't a power play by a minister or whatever in that regard. We saw during the COVID pandemic, for example, that there were some crazy regulations that were being passed, and Parliament basically sat back and did nothing.
Meanwhile, Eskom says it hopes to secure exemptions to help bring back generation capacity at Koeberg.
Koeberg 1, 2, and 3 that are unplanned outages. And up to now, we're looking at some of these coming back only about a year from now. It is important that we look at ways and means of accelerating the fixing of these power stations and of these units. And there may be things that may be required, things like exemptions. Us as the board, together, of course, with management, we need to be looking and are looking at ways and means of getting those exemptions.
An announcement on the state of disaster is expected soon after the Lekgotla, but it may be preceded by a cabinet reshuffle, with ANC Deputy President Paul Mashatile likely to replace Mabuza. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Govan Whittles in Pretoria.